Nobody saw this coming. Not the 16,000 fans packed into Stadium 1 at the Indian Wells Tennis Garden, not the analysts, not even the most optimistic supporters of Alexandra Eala. And yet, on a warm California night, a 20-year-old from the Philippines walked onto the biggest stage in tennis outside of the Grand Slams and proceeded to dismantle the world number 4 and reigning US Open champion Coco Gauff in a performance so controlled, so tactically sharp, so mentally composed that by the time the scoreboard read 6-2, 2-0 and Gauff reluctantly walked to the net to retire, the entire tennis world was left scrambling for words, and I am here to give you every single detail of what went down, what it means, and why this night might just be the moment we look back on as the beginning of something truly special in the women's game. But before we go full celebration mode, and trust me, there is plenty to celebrate, we owe it to the integrity of this story to tell it completely and honestly, because what happened out there on court was equal parts Eala brilliance and Gauff heartbreak, and both sides of that coin deserve your full attention. Let's start with the context, because context is everything in tennis. Just 17 days before this match, on February 20th, these exact same two players faced each other in the quarterfinals of the Dubai Tennis Championships, and it was not close. Gauff absolutely steamrolled Eala, 6-love, 6-2, in a match that felt like a masterclass in dominance. Gauff was everywhere, crushing returns, smothering the baseline, suffocating every rally before Eala could even begin to construct a point. It was the kind of defeat that leaves a mark, and Eala sat in front of the press afterward and said something that takes real courage to admit publicly. She acknowledged there was a significant gap between her level and Gauff's, and that her job was to go back to work and close it. Now, most players say something like that after a tough loss. It's standard post-match press conference language. What separates the truly special ones is what they actually do when no cameras are watching, in the training sessions between tournaments, in the tactical conversations with coaches, in the mental preparation before stepping back onto a court against the same person who just handed you one of the most lopsided losses of your career. Whatever Alexandra Eala did in those 17 days, it worked, because the player who walked onto Stadium 1 at Indian Wells was unrecognizable from the one who left Dubai deflated. She came out composed. She came out with a plan. And from the very first rally, you could sense something had shifted. Now Gauff, to her credit, started this match exactly the way you would expect the number 4 player in the world to start: aggressively, assertively, with total belief in her own game. She broke early and moved to a 2-1 lead, and for just a moment, the crowd, which was loudly and understandably pulling for the American home favorite, exhaled. But that was the last moment of real comfort Gauff would feel in this match, because Eala didn't flinch. She didn't retreat. She looked at that 2-1 deficit and responded by fundamentally changing how she was engaging with the rallies. Instead of absorbing Gauff's pace and hoping for errors, Eala started dictating. She started using the drop shot with a precision that forced Gauff forward and disrupted her rhythm completely. She positioned herself deeper on the return to cut off the angles and rush Gauff's service motion, a particularly devastating tactic given that Gauff has been struggling badly with double faults throughout the 2026 season, a problem that was already visible in her previous round against Kamila Rakimova, where she scraped through in straight sets but was leaking unforced errors from the service line like a ship taking on water. Against Eala's aggressive returning and relentless pressure, those serve problems became catastrophic. The double faults piled up. The unforced errors multiplied. And Eala, sensing blood in the water, reeled off 5 consecutive games to turn a 2-1 deficit into a 5-2 commanding lead. Every game during that run told a different story. There was a grinding extended 4th game that Eala clawed back from the edge, a dominant 5th game where she barely gave Gauff a sniff, and a beautifully constructed 6th game where tactical variety and sheer determination combined to give Eala a cushion that felt almost surreal given where this match had been just 30 minutes earlier. At 5-2, something changed in the atmosphere inside the stadium. It wasn't just the scoreline. It was the way Gauff was moving. It was the way she was carrying her left arm. The stadium went quiet as Gauff called for a medical timeout and the trainer rushed onto the court to attend to her left shoulder and forearm with what became heavy supportive taping. Players take medical timeouts. It happens. But this one felt different. When Gauff returned to the baseline to serve, the compromise in her motion was visible to anyone watching. She was clearly in significant pain. She fought on, and that itself deserves acknowledgement, because soldiering through mounting injury in a high-stakes match requires its own kind of toughness. But a double fault handed the first set to Eala, 6-2, and the symbolism of that moment was impossible to miss. The very shot that had been her Achilles heel all season became the full stop at the end of a set she simply could not win under these circumstances. Eala carried every ounce of that momentum into the second set. She broke immediately, moved to 2-love, and it was at that precise moment 54 minutes into the match that Gauff made the decision that, while painful, was absolutely the right one. She walked to the net. She pulled Eala into a hug. She apologized for ending it this way and explained, with obvious distress, that the pain had started in the very first set and had been getting progressively worse with every single point, even on shots where her left arm was barely involved. Gauff described the sensation afterward as feeling like a firework going off inside her arm, the entire limb on fire, nerve pain radiating through with an intensity that made continuing not just difficult but genuinely dangerous. This was only the second retirement of Gauff's entire WTA career, and her first since Cincinnati in 2022. For someone as competitive and as driven as Coco Gauff, walking off a court mid-match, especially against a player she had beaten convincingly just weeks before, on one of the biggest stages of the year, must have felt devastating. But nerve pain is not something you push through for a second-round match at any tournament, no matter how prestigious. The sport is a marathon, not a sprint, and Gauff clearly understood that protecting her body for the long term with the Miami Open, the rest of the clay season, the summer hard courts, and ultimately the Grand Slams on the horizon was infinitely more important than grinding through 50% of herself for another game or two. Her medical team has reportedly indicated that this is not a long-term structural concern, and she is targeting a return at the Miami Open, the second half of what the tennis world calls the Sunshine Double. We genuinely hope she gets there healthy and firing, because when Coco Gauff is at full strength, she makes the whole tour be. She pushes everyone to a higher level. That's not a consolation. That's just the truth. Now, let's talk about what Alexandra Eala did here, because while the retirement obviously colors this result, it would be deeply unfair to reduce this performance to a simple narrative of right place, right time. Eala did not stumble into a fortuitous situation. She created the situation. She came in with a tactical blueprint that was working before Gauff's arm became an issue. She was winning the rally exchanges. She was exploiting the serve. She was imposing her will on the match in a way that the Dubai result gave absolutely no indication she was capable of doing. The drop shot usage alone was a coaching masterpiece, identifying that Gauff's movement forward, particularly on a slightly slower Indian Wells hard court surface compared to the lightning-fast conditions in Dubai, could be disrupted and exploited, and then executing that plan under 16,000 watching eyes without a single moment of hesitation. The desert air and the particular grit of the Indian Wells surface gave Eala those crucial fractions of a second she needed to redirect Gauff's power instead of just absorbing it, and she used every one of those fractions. That is intelligent, mature, adaptable tennis from a 20-year-old in only her second real meeting with a top 5 opponent. Speaking of adaptability, Eala is a product of the Rafa Nadal Academy, and you can see the Spanish influence all over her game. The heavy topspin ground strokes, the grinding baseline resilience, the refusal to concede a single rally without making her opponent earn every single point. But what we saw at Indian Wells was not just the Nadal Academy template being executed. It was that template being evolved and expanded. Eala was not merely grinding. She was constructing points, varying pace, changing direction, coming forward when it made sense, and refusing to be predictable in the way that cost her so dearly in Dubai. That kind of tactical flexibility at 20 years old against the current US Open champion, on the biggest non-slam stage in the game, is genuinely rare. And let's talk about the mental side for a moment, because we sometimes undervalue just how hard it is psychologically to compete effectively against an injured opponent in tennis. The rhythm breaks down completely. The tension evaporates. You find yourself either letting up subconsciously out of empathy, or tightening up because you know the world is watching and waiting to say you only won because the other player was hurt. Eala navigated that psychological minefield without a single visible stumble. She stayed locked into her own patterns, her own game plan, her own processes, right to the very last point. That mental discipline is not something you can fake, and it is not something that just appears. It is built, deliberately, through preparation and self-belief. After the match concluded, Eala stepped up to the microphone for her on-court interview in front of those 16,000 fans. And what she said in that moment made every person watching, regardless of who they were, rooting for, pause and appreciate the character of this young woman. It was March 8th, International Women's Day, and Eala used her platform to honor the trailblazers of women's tennis. She thanked Gauff directly, calling her an incredible competitor and an inspiring role model for women everywhere, wished her a full and swift recovery, and acknowledged openly that she did not want to win this way, but that she was deeply grateful for the opportunity to compete on this stage against such a fierce rival. That is not a scripted post-match answer. That is someone who genuinely understands what sport is actually about beyond the scoreline, and who has the grace and the presence of mind to express it in a moment where she would have been entirely forgiven for simply celebrating herself. By reaching the round of 16 at Indian Wells, Alexandra Eala has made history. She is the first Filipino player to advance this deep in the draw since the tournament's very inception. Let that sink in for a second. Indian Wells has been running for decades, hosting some of the greatest players in the history of tennis, and no player from the Philippines had ever gone this far. Until now. The Philippines, a country with a deeply passionate and underrepresented tennis community, now has a genuine flag bearer on the biggest courts in the world, and the reaction back home has been exactly what you would expect: pure, electric, unbridled joy. With this result, Eala improves her record against top 5 opponents to 3 wins and 3 losses, with previous victories over the likes of Iga Swiatek, Madison Keys, and Jasmine Paolini confirming that this is not a player who gets lucky against great opponents, this is a player who knows how to beat great opponents. But this win at Indian Wells feels categorically different from those. It feels like the one that shifts perceptions permanently. Now the tennis world does not just see Eala as a talented young player capable of the occasional upset. They see her as a legitimate, present-tense threat on every big stage she enters. Up next in the round of 16, Eala faces the world number 14, Linda Noskova of the Czech Republic, another young, physically imposing baseliner who hits the ball with serious power and has been playing some of the most consistent tennis of her career. Noskova is not someone who gives you anything for free. She makes you earn every single point, and she has the kind of weapon-heavy game that can punish any tactical hesitation. Eala admitted in her press conference that she had not even begun to think about that match, yet she had literally just walked off the court, but she knows the challenge ahead is enormous. She will need the same focus, the same variety, and the same refusal to be pushed around that she showed against Gauff if she wants to keep this historic run alive. But honestly, after what we just witnessed on Stadium 1, after watching a 20-year-old build a tactical blueprint, execute it under massive pressure, manage a complicated and emotionally charged match situation with total professionalism, and then stand in front of the world and speak with genuine grace and humility, I am not prepared to count her out against anyone. Because the match that just happened was not simply about a scoreline or a retirement. It was about a player announcing herself to the world on her own terms. It was about 17 days of work transforming a 6-love, 6-2 humiliation into a commanding performance on an even bigger stage. It was about the Philippines celebrating one of their own, standing tall where no one from their country had ever stood before. It was about Coco Gauff showing the maturity to protect her body and live to fight another day, and about 2 extraordinary young athletes sharing a hug at the net that reminded everyone watching why sport, at its best, is so much more than just winning and losing. So to Alexandra Eala Mabuhay, the stage is yours. The world is paying attention. And we cannot wait to see what comes next.